Hello, everyone, and welcome on into the Unabated podcast. I'm Thomas Viola, and joining me, as always, Mr. Unabated himself, Captain Jack Andrews. Jack, we are in full swing. It is October, which could be the best
Yeah,
sports betting month of the year when it comes down to it.
absolutely. It is the sports equinox, which is probably one of the dumbest terms ever because it's not an equinox. It's if anything, it's like an alignment. It's a sports eclipse,
Hmm.
but nobody uses that phrase. But yeah, oh, it's all the sports. We got NHL starting, we got NBA a couple weeks off, NFL, CFB in full swing.
Yeah,
Baseball's in the playoffs when all of a sudden runs are at a premium.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's a great time of year.
it's truly the sports solstice because it's not about the equinox is the
Solstice.
balance. The solstice is top and bottom.
Okay. Okay. Let's workshop that a little bit more. I don't know. We'll come up with something.
Yeah.
But I believe it's going to be later in the month is when we actually somebody will have the phrase sports equinox or
Yeah.
some sports book will put out that promotion. Speaking of sports books, I was wondering how are you doing with going down to Arizona to escape the dearth of betting in the Las Vegas desert for the springing eternal across the dam in Arizona?
Well, as one of my friends said this week, he said, "I'm really looking forward to when we get sports betting here in Las Vegas." But my dad was in town this weekend, and my parents are actually moving out to Vegas. They're
Oh,
closing on a house, so big deal for them. Going to be interesting in a lot of good and bad ways having them out here. But so he came with me on my now weekly journey on Friday nights to Arizona, and he was like, "This is ridiculous." But the betting itself has been pretty good. Props have been pretty steady for me. This was actually a really good prop week. Shout out to Derek Carty and the blitz numbers for NFL there. And I know our college football props were a little bit down, but I actually had a pretty good weekend on them, so I was happy about that. It's the teasers that killed me this week, but I think I'm fully expecting I'm getting to the point now where I'm like, okay, some of these books, like your Bet 365s of the world, I have a feeling are going to start coming down on me pretty soon here.
I mean, probably. That's just the passage of time.
Yeah.
You did get Sport Trade opened up in Arizona this past week, so you got that now
Yeah.
to add into the outs, and they do some prop bets there as well. I was kind of surprised at what they offer.
Yeah, shout out to Sport Trade. They're doing great work out there in the exchange game, and it's nice to see them in now another state, a little bit more of a Western Coast presence. I'm certainly not complaining about having that out on Fridays now, but I'm ready for NBA season too. I feel like NBA props. You want to talk about the most low hanging fruit that we're gonna get? NBA props are really one of them.
Yeah, NBA props, there's so many different things involved with NBA. A lot of it is news and usage based. We're going to have more to talk about NBA props in a couple weeks, but this week we have Andy Molitor, who I say it every time, the funniest man
Yes.
in gambling Twitter. He just always seems to come up with a line or something that just has me spit my coffee on the screen. So it's great to have him to talk to again.
I absolutely wish that I had his quick wit. And that is, I like to think of myself as a pretty witty person. He is absolutely one. If you're not following Andy MSFW on Twitter already, make sure you do because he's got both great analysis and fantastic one liners. But yeah, I am really looking forward to this conversation. We are into the thick of football season now. We are officially off and running into the second month. It's going to be a good one. I say we bring Andy on. Let's get to it.
Let's do it.
And everybody, welcome on into the podcast, one half of the deep dive, and of course, doing all of his content over at Betsperts, a man of many talents, Andy Molitor. Andy, thank you so much for being back with us. Great to have you on again. And it was great to finally meet in person over Bet Bash this year.
Yeah, that was wild. How many people?
Yeah.
It's like, man, we've never shook hands, have we? It's been many years of talking to a lot of people online that I didn't. It was great. That was my favorite part, besides the open bars. Thanks, Derek, Spanky, everyone who, I suppose the entry fees paid for that sort of thing. But it was a ton of fun, and yeah, likewise, great meeting you guys. Great being on today, talking some football with you.
Yeah, we're very excited. We're in the thick of the NFL season here. We've got some other good stuff coming up. Of course, next week we might be talking a little more about the association, but right now we are full bore in NFL season here. We're through 4 weeks, and I feel like the biggest question, first off, has to be involving underdogs because the stats are insane so far. I get that it's such a small sample size, but underdogs of 5.5 points or more are 17-4-1 against the spread so far this season. Again, small sample size, small sample size. I'll get that out in front. But gentlemen, both of you, do you think that this is just a case of, hey, we're hitting some weird variance right now, or are we misreading the market? Is there something going wrong with the process that's getting us to some of these heavy favorites that are losing, quite frankly, outright at a fantastic clip this season so far? What do you think about that, Andy?
Probably small sample. I mean, it is just what, a 25 game thing, but I did go look. I pulled the database on all of those games. The what do we have? 17-4-1. I wanted to
Mhm.
see if, scoring in general is down. There was a couple of higher scoring games. I think Cardinals Bills was one that really brought it up, and Bengals Chiefs, Raiders Ravens were not low. Actually, Commanders Bengals had about 70 points in as well. There's a few that brought it up. There were some low scoring games. It was, I think, 10 and 12 to the over in those games. So it wasn't like signaled that it was just, oh, it was low scoring. But if you did look, I do think there were several teams that were rated too highly on their offensive side, where maybe, most people's ratings rated a lot of defenses right. I haven't had to move a lot of defenses too far, but there's a bunch of these where it's like, hey, the Cowboys versus the Saints. Obviously, they only scored 19. Some of that was in garbage time. The Cowboys are listed twice in this. They didn't cover against the Giants. We remember that kick. So there are a few teams that are on the list a couple times that maybe we were just a little too keen on the offense. The Jets, the Eagles, the Browns, the Chiefs. That they make the list against the Bengals in a close game. The Bengals and Patriots game was, God, that was ugly. So there are some offenses I think that maybe were just rated a little too highly coming in, and we've seen a lot of upsets, and it's been a pain because it's something I try to push out of my head. I'm like, it's just the aggregators. Like, there's too many people that have accounts that push that stat out 14 times a week, and I'm reading it too much, but it gets in your head. It does make you think about it. Like,
Yeah.
am I overrating all these offenses as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just 1 second, Tom. I agree with Andy. Put me in the variance compartment as well, because they love those stats, right? They love the things that people are like, oh, but Vegas knows everything and Vegas got this wrong. Well,
Yeah.
we all know what the fallacy is right there from the beginning. So let's chalk it up to variance. I'd love if one of those, I love the term aggregator, would circle back to this at the end of the year and realize, oh, yeah, it evened out.
It does tend to over a nice enough sample.
I think I completely agree. It is way too small of a sample size, and it definitely is variance. But I feel like if there is any sort of signal to pull out of something like this, my guess is that it would have to do with teams shaking the rust off from not playing in preseason, as more and more teams just aren't playing their starters in the preseason. And at least for the first couple of games there, it did look like there
Mm,
was a little bit of rust on some of these teams that could have caused us to be overrating their offenses, who would regress to the mean throughout the season.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that one. I think that angle, game 1 or 2, but not
Not game.
4 weeks in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
nevertheless, I thought it was an interesting stat and wanted to get your opinions on it here. But I think the other problem so far this season, we're 4 weeks in. Who is actually good, Andy? Who is good at football this year? Because we are getting real close to that point where the NFL has perfected parity to the point where every team is bad.
Yeah, and I mean, the question you're answering is like, whose offense is good and who makes good late game decisions? Because, man, the more I look at the makeup of like this Washington team, it's like the meme where you have the two angry guys on either side of the bell curve, or the angry guys in the middle of the bell curve. It's like, no, you can't win with a bottom three defense, and the other two are just like Jaden Daniels, go Burr, and I do rate offense at a pretty heavy clip, as far as compared to how I rate my defenses and the overall weighting of a team. But this is crazy. I think Sam Hoppen put the chart out, and I mean everyone's chart's going to look that same if you look at offensive and defensive EPA, and instead of up and to the right, it's just down and to the right, where they are so far into the fun zone where they're going to score 1,000 points and give up 1,000. I don't know if that flies in the playoffs, but the more I look at it, this flies in the regular season. It flies enough to win a division. Definitely flies enough to win, enough games to make the playoffs in the NFC. So begrudgingly, a team that I started very low. I'm gonna have to look how low they were week to week. I mean, I think it was like 29th or 30th for me. Washington's probably good enough because they have an offense. And then I don't know if something is just broken inside of me over the years with Minnesota. Being a fan when I was younger, watching 98, watching 48, 41 Donut and some of those things, but I struggled to believe some things are real there. But Minnesota's probably pretty good too. People are quick to point out that Darnold was like, oh, Darnold did this in Carolina. And that was a Matt Rule team that had like DJ Moore and nothing else on it.
Yeah.
I think maybe rookie Chuba Hubbard, and looking at the rest of that roster and who was coaching there, Phil Snow, there was not the coaching acumen that you have here with KOC and Flores. So I think Darnold is probably sustainable, especially with the pieces around him. Minnesota's good, despite what we saw last night. I think Seattle gets healthy. Their offense, if they're going to be leaning into that passing game that has starting to look a little better every week under Grubb, they're definitely good. And then, Kansas City's good by default. I guess they're just going to win every game by under a field goal and go 12-5, make the playoffs, and then turn it up.
That's the thing with Kansas City. They're not at that point in the season just yet where we say, wow, they actually haven't figured it out this year. And then it inevitably follows with a Super Bowl three-peat. Like, I feel like we all just know what's coming at this point.
Yeah. And then Green Bay too, getting healthy. That's a weird 2-2 team. I bet, you do the time machine, say like, hey, we had to start Malik Willis 2 of the first 4 weeks. We went 2-2 though. Like, oh, I'll shake hands on that as a Packers fan. Like, it's not what you think though. Kind of
Yeah.
went the opposite way, buddy. So what we saw in the second half of the Vikings game, if they can get that offense trucking, like they're going to be just fine as well. Obviously, same goes with Buffalo, Baltimore, San Francisco. They all have their little flaws, but there's still an upper crust here.
Yeah. And like Green Bay, they're definitely going to have to deal with now the Christian Watson injury. That's going to be a big deal for them. But they have a lot of depth at receiver. And apparently, bringing it back to the Chiefs for a second, somehow Rashee Rice did not tear his ACL.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
We know that we're recording this on a Tuesday, but they were still getting more opinions, right? So is it a done deal?
Latest is it sounds pretty untorn.
Okay.
I've never described a knee as that way, but
Yeah.
they're saying it's still bruising, possible PCL injury, still multiple week injury, but it's much better than.
Season.
I mean, even if you get them back for the playoffs, like that's a huge win comparatively.
Okay.
Yeah. And it helps that they play such an awful division where they're not going to have to worry as much about that anyway.
True. All right. So what about some of these teams that are clearly not who we thought they were? they're just not good. I think Carolina has probably been the poster child for people said, oh, they might be decent. Oh no. But now they got Andy Dalton in there. Is that making a difference? Who are some of these teams that are just not as good as we thought they were?
I mean, some of my biggest downgrades from full season downgrades from preseason numbers to where I'm at right now are, obviously quarterback ones. Although even with Tua in, I'm not so sure I'd be terribly high in Miami right now. The Cleveland numbers, that's been disappointing because that was a team we thought could pull some of the stuff that, the Houdini trick Tomlin pulls. Like maybe this offense isn't a complete deal, but at the same time, they have enough defense to just keep it close, play a close game, and get some wins. They should have a little better play out of the quarterback. We expect it to be a top 5 offensive line, and injuries / Watson playing bad has really drugged them down for me. I've downgraded Cleveland quite a bit, and it sucks because Watson didn't play that bad last week, and it's kind of the I joked with Drew about that. You need both things. Like you need everyone else to be healthy now. And now that Watson's finally going to get it, they have an offensive line that can't stop a stiff breeze, and he's just going to be constantly under duress again. Amari Cooper's not living up to expectations. They've been a pretty big downgrade from where I started the season. Sadly, too, Indy, a team that looked good at times, but That's an offense we expected a lot more out of. I don't know that going back to Richardson is going to be, a huge difference between what we saw in the second half with Flacco. He's struggled with his accuracy. Obviously, that was a knock coming in, and the defense is so injured. It wasn't going to be a super strong defense, but man, the injuries for Indianapolis have dragged them down a bunch too. So it stinks because those were some teams I was kind of hopeful to join the fray in the AFC in the playoffs this year.
I mean, at least Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson, it's the same exact playing style coming in there, but that defense
Yes.
cannot stop a nosebleed. It's bad.
Yeah, that and the Chargers too with the injuries. It does suck that a lot of the downgrades are just based on like, well, you guys drew the short straw this year. A
Yep.
bunch of teams are going to get injury bad luck, and you guys are at this there. So
Yeah, it is really. I mean, but that's the part of the game that we just can't quantify and account for. And these are the teams that it's absolutely hitting so far this year. I I really feel like the Browns just need to unleash Jameis Winston. Just come on. You're not going to be good, then at least give us a show.
at least be fun. Yeah, that'd be interesting because I don't know what that offense is supposed to be right now. And we talked about that yesterday too with a new offensive line coach.
Yeah.
Something you don't really think about between that and the injuries. It's been a very bad product in front of, maybe it won't matter who's back there right now for Cleveland.
Yeah. Now, looking at the board this week in particular here, was there any early movement that particularly stood out or surprised either of you guys?
Week 5 looked a little last night, updated it from the look aheads and whatnot. The Dallas Pittsburgh move was pretty big.
Yeah.
And that's one of those where I disagree with the size of the move. But then the secondary part of making a bet is, actually agreeing with your numbers as far as the matchups and the stylistic part of it. And I can't get there with, backing Dallas right now against a good defense. The way that offense has looked a little lost at times, seems to run through one person, no real running game to speak of, and there's been other issues. Obviously, I just can't move a number that far based on some defensive injuries, no matter how good they are. I mean, it's a defensive player of the year candidate and another good, a guy who'd start and star for basically everybody in the league. They're going to lose for multiple weeks, but still a big move against a team that's offense has been maybe a little smoke and mirrors this year.
Yeah. I mean, like, is Justin Fields really a 300-yard passer every week like he was this week?
Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll see with the Dallas defense if they decide to tackle this week.
Mhm.
But like I just talked about, they got to play Indy. It's going to make a lot of people look good a lot of times this year.
Yeah.
I've already started looking at this week, and as Tom knows, I'm not somebody who goes in and out of what the line moves are all week. But this coming weekend is one of the rare times when I'll be in a sports book on an NFL Sunday and Monday. And so I'm kind of like, I need to have like some knowledge. I need to know where the lines have moved because I know that sitting there, I'm going to want to make some bets. And I'll be at Circa. So it's not like I can just pick off stale lines or anything. So I've already started looking at it. And one of the things that jumped out to me was the Monday night game coming up, the New Orleans, Kansas City, which a casual sports fan would say, oh, okay, those are two good offenses. But now we've seen New Orleans might be the emperor has no clothes because they just can't seem to get it moving as much as they were when they played that Dallas game. And of course, they played the Carolina game. And the line on this game, Circa actually opened a little high. They actually opened a 43 and a half. It's now down to 42 and a half. Now, the 43 is not the keyest of totals numbers, but it's an odd number, still decently significant. What do you guys make of this? I feel like the public is going to like the over in this game, but I'm thinking I should look for value on the under if it gets over to 43 or 43 and a half again.
I already played this under.
Yeah.
This stuck out like a sore thumb with
Yeah.
just looking at my defensive ratings. And I did see that when I looked at the board. I'm like, oh, Circa, should I drive to Iowa for this, or are we going to trying to find a really cheap 42 and a half? I did play some under 42 and a half, and yeah, the Emperor's New Clothes may be a good way to describe the Chiefs offense because it's been a lot of short stuff. People got excited off the bat that first couple drives heading into the season, standalone game. We saw the speed of Worthy. We saw Rice clicking, and people forgot all about how last year we eased Kelsey in over the course of like 12 weeks, and he was good in the playoffs. So that's fresh in our mind. But I mean, he was dusty last year too, and a little more involved in this last week, but that was an offense that was stuck in mud for a lot of that Chargers game. This is a better defense they're going to face. I have the Saints rated pretty high. We'll see what they look like in the injury front. They've had a knock here and there, but the Chiefs as well. Like when they're fully healthy, that's one of my top 5 defenses right now. Despite losing, yeah, I've moved the Chiefs up. I actually have them 6th, I guess. So not quite a top 5 defense, but close enough semantics. And I worried that they were going to drop a little more with losing Snead, but they've been pretty decent in coverage as well, and obviously have a good pass rush. So I expect some struggling offenses in a game that we were probably looking at a couple weeks ago. I'll be like, oh, look at the fireworks. We're gonna have the
Right.
Clint Kubiak offense and Andy Reid unleashing. Like this could be a slog like we saw last week with the Chargers.
Interesting.
I mean, you see it with on the Chiefs side, like you said, we got the flashes early, but Kelsey's still very clearly warming up into the season. Rashee Rice now, how are they going to adjust to that? You still don't have Isaiah Pacheco, and on the other side, it's not like this is the first time that Derek Carr has had 2 amazing games to start a season and then turned into a pumpkin. Like this is kind of his thing. And this Saints offense, yeah, are they really going to be able to move the football against the Chiefs defense like this? I'm with you guys on the under here, which means we might see the next Rams Chiefs game here.
Well, I haven't made a bet on it yet. Maybe I did miss a decent number with 43, maybe, but it's good to hear a vote of confidence towards that. So, Andy, let's talk power ratings. You mentioned your power ratings there as you would kind of increase the standing of the Chiefs defense. What role do power ratings play in your process? And then walk us through the basics of how you create your power ratings, including what you and Drew did this summer on your podcast.
Yeah, we kind of reinvented the process to make content around it, which is fun, but also I think enlightening to talk about how we did it on the air, because anytime you do anything content wise, it does bring a little of accountability. You can't just BS with some numbers, be like, I don't know, it's like the 4th best team, right? You can just say that, and you can do that 15 times. Be like, this guy has 4 fourth best teams. Like, what is he doing? He's just making stuff up. But we used a lot of the same data we normally would use, pulling it in to inform our priors from the year before. Obviously, just having a second year of power ratings is going to make this a lot easier. Like it's going to be a pain in the butt anyone doing it the first time, but once you have last year's numbers to kind of build off of, and then you just start adding and subtracting players, coaches, scheme, whatnot, it does make that part a little easier. But yeah, we started to break it down into, what do you want to call it, digestible chunks of the smaller pieces of the overall power rating of the team, which was quarterback, offensive coordinator, offensive line, skill position players, and then on the defensive side, run stop, power rush, edge rush, pass rush, coverage, and then some smaller numbers for special teams and just overall coaching and intangibles. And then we had some conversations about how they should all be weighted, and I came up with some numbers. We pretty much agreed on that, and we both said like this is going to be a work in progress. I think we even tried to explain that on the podcast and said how I'm doing this right now might not be how I'm doing it in 3 weeks as I start to bring in the adjustment numbers. And it's almost like a second stage of this, because you only have prior numbers, rosters, coaches' names, and your opinions really to inform you on how to make those preseason power numbers. But once you get to week 2, you have data, you have film, you have opinions and everything. You got to decide which one of those matter, at what rate, how much are you weighting priors. And I think that's the toughest part for people, is to decide, I don't think it needs to be 75% priors, 25% new information, for every team down the board. I think that is a very moving number because we're talking about a sport where one position is just massively
Hmm.
overweighted as far as importance compared to a lot of, I mean, there's nothing like quarterback in basketball. Starting pitcher is obviously very important, but they only pitch once every 5 games. So the fact that, I have a Washington rating from last year, it has to almost get thrown out at some point, a lot faster than a lot of other teams. Like if you figure out quarterback or your quarterback is simply not where we thought he was supposed to be this year, it's crazy how quick you have to throw out some of those, those priors on those teams, just because nothing else is really going to matter if that position is playing at a couple degrees of, orders of magnitude differently than we thought it was going to.
So, for those that might not be aware, over the course of the summer, you and Drew basically talked out your power ratings for each team one episode. You did 30 episodes, which was pretty amazing. Now, I didn't listen to all 30 episodes, but
It's a lot.
every time I would get into my car, there would be a new deep dive podcast up about a team. And so I got addicted to just, I'd drive somewhere, I'd put it on, 1.5 speed and just power through it and kind of just absorb the knowledge as I drive. And I got the idea is like, well, what are you going to do with these power ratings at the end of the year? So I reached out to both of you and I set you guys up on Unabated to use our future simulator. And then the final episode of the summer, you guys basically did that live on the podcast. You had some great feedback for us for improving the future simulator, which we're going to use in the future. Drew's feedback was more colorful. I mean, there was a few F-bombs dropped in there when something didn't go the way that he wanted it to. But overall, what was your experience using the simulator? And now that you're updating your power ratings as the year goes on, are you going to circle back and use it some more in midseason?
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes back to another conversation we had. Like, you have to respect the market. These are your opinions. This is your power ratings. You still have to respect the market. You have to respect the market every week. I'm going to have some stuff that's off. And this is a good way to figure out quickly without doing a lot of math and pulling in, if you don't want to back out the market informed power ratings from all the lines, this is a pretty easy way to do it. Instead, you put it into the unabated simulator there, and it's quickly going to tell you which teams you value much more than the market, because say, well, you should be betting on these teams. They're going to be highlighted. Like, hey, here's the Falcons team, Andy. You might want to bet them to win the Super Bowl, the conference, the division, most wins, all win total over. I think Atlanta and Seattle were my outliers to the high end as far as, I think, a lot of positive bets. Although I did have a handful of, like, you should bet this team to make the playoffs. You like them so damn much. And that was a fun way to kind of see exactly where I was, you know, way off, maybe not way off, but at least enough off to show value against the price with the market. I think that's maybe the one of the most important things you can figure out from running through a simulator like yours.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned to people before, I feel like the value of the simulator comes, I always say October 15th to November 30th. And what I mean by that is NFL is kind of unique where there are lines up all season long on futures bets, including season wins, including alt season wins. Will they, won't they make the playoffs? And we now have more information when you get into this part of the season. Rufus always talks about the Massey Peabody ratings start out the season pretty poor, but get sharper and sharper as the season goes on. Anyone who does power ratings knows this. You have your priors, you have your preseason, and then you go, oh, they are who we thought they were. And you update your power rating. So getting into the meat of the year is when I really feel like the simulator kind of earns its accolades, I guess. But Andy, how often do you update your power ratings? Do you update them just once a week? Do you update them whenever you see news and information?
I have one big session of fixing them usually starting this afternoon and into tomorrow, like Tuesday into Wednesday. I will make some big adjustments later in the week if need be, off injuries or news, or if I think I have something wrong. And after I do that big session of fixing all my underlying numbers, getting it to where I want, I usually will go back and do a second run through. It's like, oh, what am I missing? Because suddenly, like, hey, you think this team's price for the week is about 2.5 points off, and that's a pretty damn big edge in the NFL. So I usually do have to dig back in on a couple teams, like, do I have this defense rated way too high? But it's usually one big session of it spread out over 2 days. And then, like you said, if there's news or injuries, I do have to make an adjustment. Usually if a quarterback is like 50-50, I'll have my adjustment ready. I know Rufus has stuff like that and other rating systems have that. I think Unpredictable has a quarterback coefficient that they use or whatever. But you just have both numbers ready. Like, well, yeah, and that's a good way too to tell where the books are leaning. Like with that Green Bay number last week, I put Love in. I just said, I know it's not 100%, but this would be my number with Love in, and I was pretty close. I'm like, oh, geez, this is kind of priced in already, I think, as far as Jordan Love is probably playing. And that was pretty early in the week before they talked about it. So it gives you a kind of sense on, should I be moving on this now, or am I waiting because it's one of those stupid straddle numbers where you can tell it's not moved enough for the quarterback, but it certainly isn't the price that you would see with the backup.
Yeah, it's all about that. It's all about that changing coefficient there when it comes to some of the injury plays that come into effect. Now, you mentioned some teams that you've been a little bit higher on the market this season, and you've been seeing, how has it been working so far? Have you been seeing, oh, hey, maybe the market's a little low, or have you been finding you're making the adjustment back down?
Um, I have backed Minnesota lightly in some teasers. I wish I would have gone heavier on everything they've done. Now you gotta pay a premium. Now you're betting them as a favorite on a neutral against a good quarterback and
Yep.
a team that maybe didn't look good last week, but is pretty good. But and there's a couple teams I wish I'd have been a little more aggressive on early. I have been aggressive on Tampa. I'm going to be again this week with the short week with no, it's not a rookie head coach. He's been around the block, but it's still a newer head coaching staff. Um, I guess I've probably fared better in some of these totals as well, as it's been easier. I think that the new way we've put together power ratings has led me to think differently about, the all the smaller matchups within a game. And I've been able to put together some good, I don't even know what to call it. It's just a messy spreadsheet is what it is. It's because it's unlabeled and it's only stuff I'd be able to tell what's going on because I just get ideas and start punching them in too fast. I don't take the time. And when I open it again next year, it's going to look like a disaster. But I've been able to find some nice matchup based stuff for totals that has gone pretty well. Despite I looked too, I almost did play the under in the Titans game. Now that I look back at some of the stuff, just couldn't pull the trigger on something like that. That might have put me on the floor for the night. Drew had the over, and I think that was another thing too. Having a podcast partner on the other side was maybe something, a little nudge to keep me off it as well. But I looked at that later in the week at the matchups, like Drew plus the quarterbacks means I don't know. We'll leave this one alone.
That was certainly a wild finish to an
Yeah.
otherwise stupid game.
I'm
But
still not even sure if I comprehend what happened. I actually
yeah,
replayed it, thinking the ref might explain it. No, he didn't explain it. The announcers were completely clueless, and they just rolled with it. They're like, okay, it's first and goal. It's
I love there were so many people in the Discord I was hanging out with that had that over. And they were just like, screw it, who cares? They're putting the ball to 10. Like, it doesn't matter and it's crazy. I talked to Drew about this morning. I went digging in the NFL uh, rule book, which is just online and honestly has a pretty nice built-in search feature, and they 100% got it right. It is
wow.
a crazy penalty. Normally, you kick from the 35, and if you do it, the other team gets the ball at the 20. It's a 15-yard penalty on the kicker. But since they kicked from the 20, it was half the distance. So not only do they get the ball where you kicked it, they give you an unsportsmanlike penalty. It might be the most penal penalty in all of NFL. And they probably just said, like, when is this ever going to happen? Why would somebody kick an onside kick deep? They're not allowed to anymore. They have to announce they're doing it. So it was, yeah, that plus the timing, not having enough time or not having little enough time to actually just do the kneel downs really created a dumb situation.
Yeah. I mean, you know that the kicking rules are going to get changed again next year, I'm sure, and it's going to bring even more confusion, but there's no way it's going to stay where it is.
Yeah.
But for now, Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time. It has been great having you on. I know that we'll be bringing you back again real soon before football season ends here. But of course, in the meantime, if people want to check out you and all of the great work you're doing, they can check you out on the Deep Dive podcast as well as over at Betsperts. Anywhere else that you want to plug, anything you want to throw in before we head out?
You know what? I made a link tree. It doesn't have
go.
the OnlyFans like some people's
Me
link
to
trees
it.
do. But no, it's right on my Twitter. Anything I do, I did stick in there. So you can find, any of the YouTube channels I contribute to, any of the newsletters I help write, anything's on there. So find that at my Twitter at AndyMSFW.
I have to ask, MSFW, it is a not safe for work joke, right?
Yeah, I think Drew might have come up with it. I used to get a lot of hard time from people about my Twitter handle because this was a gambling burner. I had a different Twitter, and I'm like, I can't be retweeting like tennis, tipsters on my main. So this was a burner. It was like Andy M 436258, one of those bot numbers.
Yeah.
We started the podcast with that, and somebody would joke like, "Why does Andy have a social security number in his handle?"
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I think Drew came up with it, but it's sticking for now because somebody's got Andy Molitor.
Well, I think it's a winner. And if you guys have been watching this podcast all the way through, we appreciate you guys being winners as well. Don't forget to hit that 5-star rating, like and subscribe, tell your friends about the show. You know the drill. But for now, that is going to do it for us here. We'll be back next week talking a little bit more association, I believe, if we can wrangle up. Jack, I know you won't be around. Might have some interesting guests stopping by next week. We'll have to see. All right. That's going to do it. We'll see you guys next week here on the show. And as always, best of luck and let's cash some tickets. See you next time, everybody.